Hey, Lee Robinson here at American Sentinel Canine. Thank you for tuning in. I hope that you find this video beneficial. If you do so, please give us a like or subscribe to our channel. We appreciate your support. Next, this first video in our canine series is going to start off with basic terminology, and we're going to focus in on behavioral terminology more so than genetic or anatomical or endocrinology, because those things, they're going to be a little bit more advanced. We need to start off with some basics, so when you have an animal in front of you, you're able to at least communicate about what's going on with others. Because if you don't have the ability to communicate effectively, then you may be arguing over something that really doesn't need to be argued, and maybe it just needs to be assessed and discussed. But I have always been a little discouraged when people try to argue about definitions. This is not effective. It's fine to argue if a dog is displaying certain behaviors, because we have different opinions when we actually are reading an animal about what a dog is expressing, so that's okay. But arguing on the terminology itself, what does the word mean, can be counterproductive and slow down progress. So let's start off with some basic terminology to make sure that the novices and beginners are actually still able to communicate with those of us that know what these words mean. The topic is behavioral terminology. And let's first discuss pack instinct. When it comes to a working dog, it's very beneficial in my experience to have a dog that wants to be part of the pack. Now, there are some breeds that are working animals that work independent of the pack, like livestock guardians. Personally, I don't incorporate livestock guardians into our program because those dogs are bred to work independent, and therefore they oftentimes don't take to training quite as well as an animal that has a high pack instinct. And don't get me wrong, there are livestock guardians and herder dogs that are extremely intelligent and that can learn faster than just about any other breed on the planet. You take a Malinois, a Dutch Shepherd, a German Shepherd, some of these Australian Shepherds, those dogs are extremely smart and extremely intelligent, but they're more or less a herding dog and not necessarily a livestock guardian. A livestock guardian is more like Sharpland Innets or a Caucasian or Charka or a Kangal and breeds like that. And those breeds tend to be more independent, and they're not really the type of dog that I think is the best candidate for a family environment. Of course, other people are free to disagree, and that's okay with me. I don't mind. Don't worry about what I have to think if you feel that way. But anyway, pack instinct is this desire to be with the pack. And this is important because when an animal wants to be with the pack, it also wants to please the person that is in charge, or the family that's in charge of that animal. They have this desire to satisfy, and that's very beneficial for the bonding experience and the training experience and the loyalty and the stability. So these aspects of pack instinct are very beneficial, and they have this circle of trust of those within the group versus those that are not within the group. And I like, when I say in the group, I'm talking about within the pack, within that circle of trust. You know, there should be a good bond. My dog Blue Jean is so sweet. I go out there and she literally like hugs me. She loves to be with me. Now that doesn't mean they need to be overbearing. Too much pack instinct can lead to a dog that has separation anxiety, and dogs that have separation anxiety can be destructive when the pack is gone. So pack instinct is the desire to be with you. You definitely want a lot of pack instinct, but not to the point that the animal is insecure without you. All right, next, rank drive, and I've got both intra-rank and inter-rank. Intra-rank is what I'm going to call intra-species. And if you ever look at a highway, there's intrastates and interstates. An intrastate is a highway that only goes within a state. Like in Hawaii, they don't have any interstates, it's just intrastates. They're only, and I don't even know if they use that term in the highway, but that's what intra means, within, while inter means between. So an interstate goes from one state to another state, and that's what it means with ER versus RA. So when I'm referring to here with rank drive is sometimes you have this desire to dominate within the pack, but it's species specific. Like let's say one dog maybe wants to dominate another dog, but it doesn't really want to dominate people. You might see that in some of the American Pit Bull Terrier, Amstaff type breeds. Sometimes they do want to dominate people, of course, but a lot of times the American Pit Bull Terrier is known for being people friendly. I'm just talking about sometimes you'll see these animals that will display like an alpha mentality within their own species, but they won't show it with people. Personally, I like those type of dogs. You can, especially if they have some defense drive and prey drive and some civil abilities, because these dogs can be very effectively trained and very stable within the family. I personally do not like dogs that are interspecies dominant, meaning they're willing to dominate across the species barrier into other species like human beings. I don't like dogs that like to dominate people, such as the Rottweiler or the Chow Chow and Shar-Pei and breeds like that. These dogs can have a lot of accidental bites or uncalled for bites within the family, or also within strangers that are, or friends that are in family that are invited over that the dog doesn't really know very often. You might think, well, family, they should know that. I'm talking about like maybe a cousin or an uncle that the dog doesn't know is your family, or maybe a friend that you have over for dinner, and you'll see a lot of posturing, and maybe a child drops a steak on the floor or something on the floor, and maybe you want to pick it up, but the dog goes down and wants to claim possession of that. That can cause a problem. I know of a man who had got out of bed and bent over to put his slippers on, and the dog took that, for some reason, his posturing as like challenging nature, like leaning over the dog, and then of course the dog goes off and bites the man in the head and really messed him up pretty bad. And you'll see this on news reports where a news reporter is meeting a police dog or something like that, and they lean over, and you'll see the dog display some dominance behavior, and it can lead to unwarranted bites. So I don't like a rank-driven dog, especially if it's going to be in a family environment around children or people who are not canine professionals. Now, if you're a canine officer or a security officer, nothing wrong with having a shepherd, of course, but you're supposed to be a trained professional and you know how to deal with those type of dogs. But a lot of family situations, that's not the case. So I just don't think a interspecies dominant rank-driven dog is a wise choice for a family that's looking for a personal protection dog. Again, feel free to disagree. Next, prey drive. A lot of trainers out there call this ball drive, which cracks me up. All right, wild animals have no ball drive. They're not interested in chasing a ball. There's a drive, by definition, is an instinctual behavior that is displayed for the preservation of self or species. And there's no preservation of self or species for chasing a ball. It should not be called ball drive. But people do it, and honestly it probably shouldn't even be called prey drive, because the drive is actually predatory. It's their predatory nature to chase something. They're trying to make prey out of the rabbit or the squirrel. So it's the desire or drive or instinct for self-preservation or species preservation to display behavior of a predator towards a prey item. But they call that prey drive. It's a desire to hunt, chase, catch, and kill. That's what prey drive is about. And so this is an extremely important drive when it comes to training, because you can take this drive and transition it to other objects that are typically non-prey items, such as a tennis ball. And you can use these items as reward methods to really advance that training of the canine at levels that food alone may not be able to carry that dog to such a quick and fast response. Food is great for guiding and teaching new behavior, but once the dog knows the behavior, a lot of times toys will get a better response, a sharper, faster, more alert response, because they're in that hunt prey instinct and predatory instinct where they have to really pay attention and be sharp and fast in order to catch their kill. But a food item is kind of like when a kill is already made, so there's no longer an urgency unless you just have a lot of food drive, is what people call it, when a dog really just loves to eat and has this hog type mentality where it wants to eat everything as fast as it can. But not all dogs display this extreme food drive to eat as fast as possible. So prey drive is very beneficial to an animal that you want to take to a higher level in your obedience training especially. And also in protection training, because in protection training that prey drive balances out that defensive response and produces a more confident and trainable dog that you can actually build and take to a higher level. Now, defense drive is a drive that you have to be careful about, and it is actually related, or rank is a type of defense, but not all defense is rank. Because, for example, if you attack me, I might get defensive, and that would be a sign of defense drive. But if you don't attack me, I'm not interested in posturing over you, so I don't really have any rank drive. I'm not an alpha type mentality person. I don't want to trespass against others. I believe in kind of like minding my own business. But when somebody steps on my toe accidentally, I'll say excuse you and maybe move my foot, no problem. But if they do it maliciously, that kind of sets me off, and I can become pretty aggressive in a defensive mindset and actually be rather forward in the mindset. We'll talk about that later. So there are some dogs that are defensive and seek to evade and escape. But there are also times when defense is forward, and a lot of people don't think that defense can be forward. They think it's about ending the situation, but sometimes ending the situation is eliminating the opposition. And in that, if eliminating the opposition is a sign of defense, then that can actually be rather forward. You can actually look at elephants when they're in the musk, or deer when they're in the rut, and you will see that they will defend their territory and just be chasing and chasing and chasing a competitor, alpha male, out of their two alpha males, and they'll have a major fight, and they will run sometimes very long distances to chase one another. And people might say, well, all forward behavior is prey. Well, if that's the case, then why is a non-predator species such as an elephant or a deer, who doesn't make prey out of rabbits and squirrel or other deer, why would that animal be forward? It's because they are defending their territory and they're taking a forward aggressive mindset to eliminate that competition. All right, and so that can be a defense drive, and this is extremely beneficial for a really solid protection dog. Now, the problem with defense drive is a lot of times it's incorporated with weak nerves, because you don't want the dog that's insecure or a fear biter. Those dogs are, first of all, they're non-reliable, and also they're unstable, and as a result of that, they are very limited in their potential. But if you have a confident dog with defense and prey, you can actually obtain a lot of success. So this is chase, hunt, catch, and kill, and this is, if you leave me alone, I'll leave you alone. But if you don't want to leave me alone, I will seek to either evade or to destroy. And of course, when it comes to a protection dog, we don't want to evade, we want to destroy. The fight or flight and freeze. Fight means I'm going to attack you, flight means I'm going to run away, and freeze means I'm going to be like nerve issues where you like just act like it doesn't exist and hope the situation resolves itself. So of course we don't want we don't want the flight, we don't want the freeze, we want the fight response of defense drive. Now next, I'm going to put fight drive in quotes here. Personally, I believe in fight drive. A lot of people don't. I don't want to argue with you about that. I'll just tell you why I have my opinion. Now, it is different than civil work. Civil work is when you go out and you agitate a dog and you try to get them into a fight type response where there's not targeting the equipment. They're really like targeting the response. And you would think that civil would mean polite, but and being civil is polite, right? But when it comes to protection dogs, a lot of times in the training, when we use the word civil in response to getting that dog to display fight-like behavior. And the reason why I personally believe in fight response is a lot of these behaviors are incorporated with hormones that are in our system. You know, we have many steroids, we have adrenaline. A steroid is different than most hormones. You got steroid hormones and protein hormones. Two different things, another day for another video on endocrinology. But a defense behavior can put a person in an adrenaline response. And when you have an adrenaline response, you get tunnel vision, focused vision. Certain senses are improved, certain senses are diminished. For example, your pain sensitivity declines, but your tunnel vision goes up, but your peripheral vision goes really down. And there's various things that are happening in the endocrine system when you're in a defensive or very prey-oriented behavior. But fight drive is kind of like a combination, except there is one difference. It really kind of like becomes, it's personal and it's aggressive. Sometimes they may even enjoy the combat. Like if you watch MMA, somebody gets clocked really hard, and when they get clocked really hard, maybe they smile and almost like get excited and go back into it. This is where defense has triggered prey to a degree, and some people think that fight is just a good balance of defense and prey. But one of the things that makes me really believe in fight is, let's use a hypothetical situation. Defense is about stopping a threat, right? So if somebody was to break into my home and assault my daughter and do things that are very vulgar that I'm not even going to mention, if that was to happen, obviously if I'm at home, I'm going to take a very strong defensive position. But if I'm not at home and I don't hear about it, because let's just say, you know, some women don't like to talk about such things when that happens to them, but maybe after a week of recovery and they relax, they decide to tell me what happened, and I am furious. Okay, I'm furious. I am not wanting to hunt, chase, catch, and kill a prey item, because when you're hunting a rabbit, you're not angry. Okay, you're not furious. You're relaxed and calm, and you're in a hunting state of mind. But I'm also not defending a situation, because the situation was a week ago, but I'm pissed. So I'm going to act like I'm defending a situation, but I'm going to be hunting at the same time, and my mindset includes a lot of anger. That's going to be like an adrenaline-induced behavior. And that's how I believe that fight drive is different, because it's not only an incorporation of these two, but it's also a different intent. Here, you're calm, forward hunting, relaxed in the mind. Here, you're kind of like in fear of something. Not doesn't mean you're afraid that you're going to lose. You just may be concerned that there's a risk of something happening. Here, you have like an intensity that is at another level. You got the intensity of defense, but you got the forward of prey. And so that's why I think fight drive is worth discussing. But regardless of whether it's a true drive or not, it really doesn't matter. What matters is when you're using the term that we're talking about the same type of behavior. Even if you think it's a combination of these other two drives, that's fine. Next, civil is kind of like acting fight, which we briefly discussed, so we can actually move on. But I think these actually are a little bit two different things, because here's action reaction is what civil is more like, but fight is more of an internal intent. All right. Next, confidence versus nerves. Confidence and nerves deals with the courage of the animal. And if you have a defensive dog with good prey drive and good nerves, good confidence, good courage, then you can end up with a very formidable animal. So confidence is, let's just say you're walking down the street and somebody comes by with a leaf blower, or maybe you walk into a store and there's music and ceiling fans overhead, or maybe you're jogging down the street and an ambulance drives by or a fire truck drives by. How is your dog going to respond to those types of situations? And gunfire, pow, 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 is the dog going to be able to stay in that environment? This is what confidence and nerves has to deal with. Now what's weird is you'll see confidence and nerves change quite a bit from if the dog is in drive versus out of drive. And the reason why could be related to that adrenaline response that we were talking earlier. When you have that adrenaline response, I talked about the peripheral vision diminishing and you get that tunnel vision. So a lot of times a dog that may have weak nerves might still be able to work really well if it's in drive load before it experiences those stimulus that would make it normally express weak nerves or less courage. Another thing is it depends on the training. There are ways that you can train a dog to overcome nerve issues. Not all nerve issues. If the dog's got bad nerve issues, if the dog is like a fear biter and scared of everything, then of course that animal needs to be eliminated. But if you have dogs with tremendous drive and you do some appropriate classical conditioning, associative learning type of behaviors to get those dogs to go into that adrenaline response at a word of command to go into strong drive, then a lot of times they won't even notice the things that would stimulate them when they're out of drive. However, a dog with higher nerves will be better, more trainable when it comes to not being in drive, such as when you're doing obedience. Okay, and also a dog with good nerves is going to just have a higher potential. So you want dogs with good nerves and good confidence. Now, nerves can cause a degree of instability. Stability has to do with predictability. All right, if you think of something that's stable, just think literally like a person walking on a tightrope. A person that's very stable is going to be able to stay on that tightrope, and their behavior is going to be predictable. An unstable individual is going to fall, and we don't know when it's going to fall. It could fall now, or it could fall later, or it could fall anytime in between. It could fall at a predictable moment, and it could also fall at an unpredictable moment. And so I don't like unstable dogs. That's when you end up with, I think it's kind of related to interspecies rank, and of course weak nerves as well. And so sometimes they're trigger happy, and what makes them set off could be almost anything, and so a dog that's unstable is unreliable and actually dangerous. So you want to avoid dogs that are unstable. You want a dog that's got a high pain threshold, that's got a good pack instinct, that's got good drives but also good confidence, so when the kid's running across the room and they step on the dog or fall down on a trip on a toy and hit the dog, that dog doesn't just think bite you, all right, because you don't want a reflex of an unstable dog causing a conflict that you just don't want in your home. Okay, so avoid unstable dogs. Another term that's really misunderstood is thresholds. A lot of people think that threshold is the limit of a behavior, and while that is true to some degree, a threshold actually means a transition of one behavior to another. So if we're going to, let's say, talk about my pain threshold, there's actually two pain thresholds. There's the first pain threshold that makes me recognize a stimulus at pain. This is the illicit, the one that makes me say, oh, that's painful. And then there's another pain threshold that is the maximum amount of pain that I can take before I really try to pull away from it because it's too much and I want to go into avoiding the pain. So for every behavior, there's a stimulus threshold and there is an avoidance threshold, a response threshold and an avoidance threshold. And that area between those two is where you're going to be displaying those behaviors. For example, if there's let's go back to prey drive and say that a dog is sleeping in the grass and maybe it ate a while ago and it's full and it's satisfied, and so it has no desire to hunt. But after time passes, that hunger starts to build, and when it gets enough hunger, it'll get up and want to go to a hunt. This is one of the thresholds that can lead to the beginning of prey drive. Or maybe squirrel is over off in the distance, but it's too far away and the dog doesn't feel like it can be successful to make prey out of that squirrel, so it just lays there in the grass and it's not going to chase anything. But then the squirrel comes down and gets closer to the dog, and the dog says, ooh, this squirrel is like getting closer, I think I might be able to make prey out of this item. And so the dog goes into prey drive. But then if they start to chase and the squirrel is running faster and faster and faster and the dog can't ever catch it, the dog starts to get exhaustion and tired. Let's just say it's in a rabbit in the desert. Okay, squirrel's the wrong example. But let's just say you're a rabbit in the desert and the rabbit is running and running and running and running, and the dog gets tired, the dog gets hot, the dog sees more distance getting between him and the squirrel or her and the squirrel, and eventually that prey drive could start to extinguish. Then when that behavior is starting to extinguish, which means get weaker and weaker, eventually you may reach the upper threshold and the dog gives up its prey drive. All right, so that would be when the upper threshold. So you have the initial threshold that started the behavior, and then you have the upper threshold that ended the behavior, and when the behavior ends, that's when you have the starting threshold of the next behavior to lay down and rest. Okay, so that's how thresholds work. Another term that if you extinguish thresholds repeatedly over and over and over again, and an animal is completely unsuccessful time and time and time again with displaying a certain behavior, you can actually make a behavior go extinct, which means that behavior is not going to even show up at all anymore. So I probably should have extinguish and extinct up here when we're talking about behavioral changes and thresholds. And the last term that I have on this board is gameness. Gameness is the desire to impose one's will while working in a task, despite stress. And I have versus a cur. A cur is quite a bit different. A cur is a dog that acts like it wants to do something, but it really doesn't want to. So you ever heard of a cur bay dog or something like that? A cur dog is a dog that goes in and barks at a pig, acts like it wants to fight the pig, maybe even nips on the pig's butt, but every time the pig turns around, and sometimes they don't even nip on the pig's butt, that would be what they call a gritty cur dog. So they go in there and bark and bark and bark, but every time the pig faces them, they jump back and go into avoidance because they really don't want to impose their will on the pig. They just kind of want to act like it. That's a cur dog. A game dog is a dog that does want to impose its will and is willing to do so despite stress. And there are degrees of gameness within animals. Some animals will work for a very long time, while others will work for a pretty darn impressive time, but then others very long, and then some may even work to their death. And any animal that works to its death really only did so that day, because if you meticulously set up a plan to try to break a dog, you actually can do that with intelligent design of a very brutal plan. There are ways to do that. Think about Gameness as kind of like a sheet of ice on a lake. The thicker the ice is, the tougher and more determined that ice is. And if you have a piece of ice thick enough, you can hold a locomotive that's going across a lake, and it'll support that locomotive. But even if it's 10 feet thick, or let's just go to a ridiculous level and say 100 foot thick, an intelligent engineer can always go through and design a plan that will allow that ice to be broke. They may use heat, they may use drills, they may use jackhammers, they may use track hose, but they can get through that ice with a design that's set up to break through that ice. And you can do the same thing with a dog. Don't think that any dog is unbreakable, even if it is a dead game dog, because a dead game dog may have actually had successes along that way that built its confidence and allowed it to continue to go a little further, and thinking it's always on the edge of winning, so it just keeps working and working and working and working, trying to get that win that it's so close to, and before it actually obtains the victory that it thinks is obtainable, it may fall short and pass away. And of course, while we always want to pursue the development of a canine that has such extreme commitment, the truth of the matter is those extremely dead game dogs are very, very, very rare. So we shouldn't just dismiss a dog that has displayed extreme commitment that other animals would never think about displaying, and then just keep pushing that animal to a point. We should recognize the success that animals displayed and possibly put that individual into our gene pool. And there you go. So this is video number 1 of our Canine Science series, Basic Behavioral Terminology. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we hope to see you on our next video, which I would like to have out within the week. Y'all have a blessed day. Lee Robinson from American Sentinel Canine signing out. Please like and subscribe.